So this is more GI bleeding. I'm back here with Michael Burke, Amir Klein, John Anderson and Manmeet Matsuru in the studio. I'm not sure if we have, I think we also have John Morris online. Welcome back, John. And we're going to be talking about the practical aspects. So the last session was all about theory. We had a fantastic, some fantastic talks, including a great wrap-up of the ESG guideline and of some hepatological aspects on GI bleeding. But here we're going to be talking about practical. And I'd like to start it, first of all, by a quiz question. What are you going to do with that now? Or what's your next move for that?
So some of the things that were running through my mind as you're playing this would be like knowing, actually having a plan before you do this endoscopy. So obviously knowing the surgical anatomy, knowing what had happened on the previous endoscopies, and actually really discussing it with the index surgeon, I think is always key. I always find if I have an issue after a colonoscopy, I would want to know about it. And I think in the same way, it's really crucial to have that conversation before you do any procedure, because you might want to plan it with an MDT sort of setup.
We talk counsel of perfection. Look, we need to get this bleeding stopped.
I like that.
If we waste time, trying to get an injection needle downstream or in the four quadrants, we need some adrenaline, we need some volume in here, and it will change the stigmata and it will improve the view. And if all else fails, spray the adrenaline onto the nearest point that you think is actively bleeding. Because, I've seen so many trainees wasting time and you're thinking that we're losing blood, trying to go for the counsel of perfection. This is all about hemostasis.
Okay, this was the next thing I decided to do. So I'd moved the patient by now, and I had identified the bleeding point, and I'm just not sure that we here didn't have a better view of the bleeding point. I'm going to try for this because I think it's important to see where the bleeding point was. But at some point before this, underwater, before I did the heater probe, we could definitely really nicely identify the bleeding point and where it was. If it won't work, then we'll jump. Oh yeah, okay, you can see it here.
It's worth saying that all of those gold rings are active when you're putting thermal energy down, David. So if it's lying against the mucosa, you're going to burn several rings.
So let's just look at this before we get to that. So you can see the vessel, right? Michael's point about we have all the tools to do this, I think is valid. A very important point. Here's the vessel for those of you.
There's potentially a big thing that might be just that's just a nick in the vessel.
But here, a very good point. But the visible part of the vessel is here. So in that situation, I think here, as Michael alluded to before, you're left with only one option, Amir, and that is something that you're going to cover shortly, but we'll try and show it, and if we can't show it, then it may be a good time to jump into your talk, really, and talk about that. Let's just, oh yeah, we have it here.
Can I just ask a brief question, David, about the report and the instructions for the person looking after this patient after your procedure, and what advice was given to the ward team, plan for second endoscopy, the sort of management ongoing thereafter?
Well, let's hold that for 1 second. I think that's a very important question. But you can see it's still bleeding. Now the over-the-scope clip is mounted on a different endoscope, and we'll talk about the technique quickly of doing that. I think it's instructional here because, the video playing is a little jumpy, so it's not ideal to tell the story. But there was more heater probe, didn't work. You can see the impression of the heater probe beautifully there. Therefore, I think, where the vessel is. Therefore, you know what you need to target with the over-the-scope clip. And it's simply a case of seeing if it will suction into the cap. I had a cap on the scope before. I think you can see the vessel there, can't you? As it comes up into the device. It's right where the mouse is sitting at the moment, right under here. So you'll see it come up in a second.
I mean, you're fortunate the tissue's compliant, David.
Well, that's it. But I think you can test that if you have a cap on the endoscope, You can test whether you're going to get suction or what else you need. You also have the other devices, the anchor and whatever. But Michael was right, Amir was right. This is a huge blood vessel in this area. And so we suction it into the cap.
So we're simply not going to cover the entire area and hope for the best. Let's actually aim to target our therapy. And we want to be delivering this about 1 to 2 centimeters from the lesion. Any closer, we're going to get backflow. And think about the anatomy. If we are targeting a high lesser curve ulcer, then actually displacing the powder from more proximally, or firing the powder more proximally, will allow the powder to flow over the surface of the bleeding point, and therefore much more effective therapy, avoiding the risk of ineffective treatment.